So tell me about the story you were just talking about how the day would start with the makeup and getting and then having to go to eat and come back. And tell me that.
Well, it isn't easy to be a star at MGM or any studio, particularly MGM, because the commissary was quite a long distance away from the actual sound stages. So you would you'd have to take your clothes off. You'd have to put on your own clothes. You have to take all your costume off, put on your own clothes. Then you'd have to walk about a half a mile, go to the commissary. Then you'd have to wait in line. And then you'd have to sit down and order your food, and that took a long time. And then you'd have to eat as fast as you could, and you maybe would have like 10 minutes to eat, to actually eat. And then you'd get back to the sound stage. They'd have to put all your body makeup on again and get you into your costume. The makeup man would have you. Then they'd have to comb your hair. So it was, by the time you got back on the set, you were worn out. Then in the mornings, early mornings, before you ever, did anything, you would run into the makeup. They would have you wash your hair, roll it all up, and then they would put you in a makeup chair. They would put your makeup on, and they'd slam you under a dryer for about 10 minutes. And then they'd start combing it all out, making it look pretty. Then they'd haul you down to the sound stage, into your dressing room, put all your body makeup on. Then they'd put your costume on. Then the makeup man came in and the hairdresser came in. By the time you got on the sound stage by 9 o'clock, you were exhausted. But then, of course, when you started to work, it was such a joy. I mean, it was such a joy working for me at MGM. It was like going to a big party. And particularly the rehearsals. It was just like going to a big party. It was wonderful. And I loved every minute of the time that I had. 12 years of being on the MGM lot.
Janet talks about hurting herself, falling, tripping. She had to do some shots with an actor. He was twirling her and he tripped and she broke her shoulder.
Oh, my word.
Did you ever break anything?
Yes, I did, but not in that way. I had a husband that was very vicious and mean, and I got a divorce from him, but he threw me down a flight of stairs and I broke my back. And it took me quite a while to get all together again, and then I did Easter Parade. I got my big break. And that's a funny story, not funny, sad story. Gene Kelly was supposed to have done Easter Parade with Sid Charisse. Gene Kelly broke his ankle. Sid Charisse broke her leg. I got Sid's part, and Fred Astaire got Gene Kelly's part. And then I did that big number in Easter Parade, Shaking the Blues Away. Well, I did it in a brace because I was in a lot of pain. You don't get over a broken back very easy. So that was my story of being hurt. Oh, then I did with Janet Leigh, my darling Janet. We did 2 tickets to Broadway together, and there was a huge number I was supposed to have done on a Peruvian pyramid. And Howard Hughes was producing the picture, and we were rehearsing. I was rehearsing with Nick Castle, and I had to do turns and step down this huge, that pyramid was 2 stories high. I slipped and fell and rolled all the way down to the bottom, and I hurt my back, and then they had to cut it out of the picture. And that was one of the biggest heartbreaks I've ever had. You asked me if I ever broke anything, I just killed myself. But I came back and danced again. Onward and upward.
What's the famous one where you're jumping on the tables?
Oh, that was with Esther Williams, the Dynamite number. That was in Texas Carnival. And I had to jump from table to table, and each time the boys would, just before I landed on the table, they would pull the tablecloth out from underneath me. So it was umpa, 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 umpa. That scared me to death. But I did it. Dancers do crazy things.
How do you rehearse something like that? Do you rehearse that actually with them pulling the things, in other words, exactly the way
Oh,
you
yes.
shoot it?
All the rehearsals were exactly like we were going to do it on the screen.
When you were in On the Town, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that Frank Sinatra couldn't really dance and that it was hard for him to do those numbers. In other words,
I don't think he'd ever danced in his life. Gene Kelly taught him to dance. He was wonderful. Do you realize that on the town, in that one big number that I did, it was called Prehistoric Man. I had behind me Gene Kelly, Frank Sinatra, Jules Munchin, and Betty Garrett. I had the world's most expensive chorus behind me. And Frank Sinatra was terrific. He danced like he had danced all of his life. I was so impressed with him, I just couldn't believe it. He was just great.
Betty Garrett said that the one thing, she said that Frank used to like to pat the girls on the rear end. And she said that he was so nervous before doing the dance numbers on the town that she said, I don't know what got into my head. I just walked up and I patted him on the rear end.
Yeah.
And he turned and he said, don't ever do that again. And she realized that they had padded him because
he was so thin. Yeah.
And Kelly had that beautiful dancer's body.
Oh, yeah, the strong legs and
the strong
filled out muscles and all that stuff. Yeah, I know.
So did he seem scared to you, or you just remember him as
I do not remember him ever being scared. I think if he was, I never saw him frightened. He just went out there and did it. He was, really, I was so impressed.
How do you suppose that the studio was able to whip people into doing these dance numbers when they really had no formal training as dancers?
Well, remember, Joan Fontaine had never danced in her life when she did Damsel in Distress with Fred Astaire. And I was just a kid on the RKO lot, and because I knew Fred and Hermes Pan, my dance director, and I would go over and sit, and Joan said to me, Annie, I have never danced in my life. What am I going to do? I've got to rehearse with this man. I said, you know something? Fred Astaire is such a great dancer. He will lead you. He won't step on your feet. Between Hermes Pan and Fred Astaire, you will dance. And he lifted her over these huge fences, supposed to be out in a big field somewhere. He lifted her over fences. He just made her dance. It was almost as if he had had a rag doll with him, and he just made that rag doll do whatever it wanted to do. She was scared to death, but she was thrilled too, but it was hard for her. But he made people dance. He made Audrey Hepburn dance and Funny Lady.
Amazing.
But fortunately for him, most of these gals that he worked with danced. Rita Hayworth and Lucille Bremer and Janie Powell was a good little dancer. And Debbie Reynolds is also a good little dancer. But all those gals, that I remember on the MGM lot, all of them danced, every one of them. They were terrific dancers.
But like Fred Astaire, Roddy McDowell said about you that you made it look easy. Never did you watch it and feel like they were doing something, like there was effort. It was effortless. Is that the difference? Did you get any training at MGM, or did you just come there as a dancer?
Pardon me. Well, you have to remember, I'm like a cat with 9 lives. When I was under contract to RKO, I was 13 years old. And I did stage door with Katharine Hepburn and Ginger Rogers, and I danced with Ginger Rogers, and I was a dancer. I was hired for my dancing. Then I was 6 years at Columbia, and I did nothing but dancing pictures. And I did 2 years at Republic, and then 3 pictures independently at Paramount. And then I went to MGM. So I was like a cat with 9 lives.
And when did
I danced. I was known as a dancer. Today, I wish I could ever forget that I danced so I could be an actress. I am going to cough. Is that all right?